The morning of my 18th birthday, they did not give me a cake. They gave me a black trash bag. It held everything I owned in this world. 3 changes of clothes, a broken alarm clock I had carried through 11 foster homes because it had been my mother's, a library book I had never returned, and a photograph I kept face down at the bottom so I would not have to look at it. Ms. Harker stood behind her desk with her hands clasped in front of her the way people stand at funerals when they do not know the family well enough to cry. She had been my caseworker for 3 years. In all that time, I had never seen her smile. Not once. I used to think she was cold. Standing there on the morning of my 18th birthday, watching her arrange her expression into something that was supposed to resemble compassion, I understood that she was not cold at all. She was just tired. 18 years of handing children trash bags will do that to a person. "You're an adult now, Wren," she said. Her voice carried that particular blend of practiced sympathy and bureaucratic exhaustion I had learned to recognize in every social worker I had ever met. "The system no longer has a place for you." She slid a folded pamphlet across the desk. Homeless shelters, bus routes, food banks, the geography of starting over with nothing. "But before you go, there's something you need to see." She nodded toward a manila envelope sitting at the edge of her desk. I did not want to touch it. In my experience, envelopes from official sources never contained good news. They contained court summons, notifications that I was being moved again, letters informing me that another family had decided I was too much trouble, that another door was closing, that another place I had briefly called home had decided I did not belong there after all. I had learned to expect nothing from pieces of paper. But Ms. Harker was waiting, so I picked it up. The label on the front was crooked. Whoever had printed it had not bothered to align it properly before pressing it to the envelope. It read, "Wren Cole Estate Matter, Harlow County, Montana." I stared at that crooked label for a long moment. It summarized my entire life in the foster care system. Close enough, good enough, but never quite right. I tore it open. Inside was a single document dense with legal language and a smaller envelope that had been opened and resealed. The document was 2 pages single-spaced full of terms I had to read 3 times before they started making sense. Words jumped out at me in pieces. Property, deceased, heir, tax delinquency, agricultural deferment, and a name I had not heard spoken aloud in more than a decade. Ruth Maddox, my grandmother, the woman I had spent 14 years believing had simply chosen not to want us. "It's a property in Montana," Ms. Harker said. "Harlow County, a place called Coldwater Flats, about 40 minutes outside the nearest town. Your grandmother passed away 8 months ago. The county has been trying to locate next of kin." She paused. "The property has back taxes owed." I looked up. $7, she said. "Agricultural deferment. Your grandmother filed the paperwork years ago. As long as the land isn't developed commercially, the tax rate stays minimal. She paid the initial filing fee, but nothing since. $7. I almost laughed. 43 acres of land in Montana, and the bill outstanding was $7. "You can pay the taxes and claim the property," Ms. Harker continued. "Or you can let the county seize it. It's your choice." Choice. Another funny word. The same word they used when they asked which foster home I preferred, as if my preference had ever changed a single outcome. I looked back down at the document and read the line I had skipped over the first time. Listed heirs. Ren Cole and Eli Cole. Eli, my brother. My 14-year-old brother who I had not seen in 3 years. Not since the Hendersons decided they only wanted one child. And I was deemed too old, too difficult, too much of a disruption to a household that had not signed up for a teenager with opinions and a habit of asking uncomfortable questions. Eli had been 11 years old the last time I saw him. He was 14 now. He was in a group home 2 counties over. I had written him letters every single month, and every month they came back unopened. "Where is he?" I asked. Ms. Harker told me. She slid another piece of paper across the desk. The address of a converted motel on the outskirts of a town called Granger Falls. She looked at me with something that was almost an apology. "Ren," she said, and then stopped. I waited. "I hope—" She stopped again, pressed her lips together, started over. "Good luck." That was all. I picked up the trash bag. I picked up the envelope. I walked out of the Harlow County Department of Child Services and stood on the sidewalk in the October sun. And for a moment, I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything I was carrying. Then I remembered the smaller envelope, the one that had been opened and resealed. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was faded soft at the edges from years of handling. The image showed an elderly woman with silver hair sitting in a rocking chair. She was holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The woman was smiling, but there were tears on her cheeks. The baby was sleeping, one tiny fist pressed against the woman's chest, fingers curled around, nothing the way newborns hold onto the world before they know they should be afraid of losing it. I turned it over. On the back, in handwriting that trembled with age or emotion or both, were 7 words and a date. "My darling Ren, the last day I held you. March 15th, 2012. I was 4 years old on March 15th, 2012. I stared at those words until the sidewalk blurred beneath my feet. She had kept this photograph. For 14 years she had kept it. She had written on the back of it. She had placed it in an envelope where it would eventually find its way to me. For all those years I had believed she had simply turned away. But this photograph did not look like turning away. This photograph looked like someone who had been holding on. The group home was exactly what the address had suggested it would be. A converted roadside motel, 2 stories exterior walkways with rusted railings, a parking lot full of cracked asphalt, and dead weeds pushing through the gaps. The paint was the color of old mustard. The sign out front still advertised vacancy in letters that had been there so long they had faded to gray. A child services employee buzzed me in through a heavy door that smelled of industrial cleaner and cafeteria food. She looked at my ID, looked at the authorization paperwork. Ms. Harker had sent ahead and pointed me toward the back of the building. "He's usually out by the bench," she said. "He doesn't like being inside." I found Eli sitting on a concrete bench behind the building, his knees drawn up to his chest. his eyes fixed on the chain-link fence at the edge of the property. He had grown. His shoulders were broader than I remembered. His jaw had sharpened. He was wearing a jacket 2 sizes too large and sneakers that had been repaired with electrical tape at the left toe. He did not look up when I approached. "Go away," he said. "Eli." I said, "Go away." I sat down beside him anyway. He flinched. A small, involuntary movement, the kind that living things develop when they have learned that closeness precedes pain. That small flinch broke something open in my chest. My little brother who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. My little brother who used to believe I could fix anything. He had learned to expect harm from the people who came close. "I'm not going away," I said. "I'm your sister. You left me." 2 words, flat as stone. But they hit like a physical blow, and I felt the impact travel all the way through me. "They took me, Eli. I didn't leave. There's a difference." He laughed. There was no humor in it at all. It was the sound a person makes when they have been disappointed so many times that the expectation of disappointment has become the only thing left to rely on. "Everyone has a reason," he said. "Everyone has an explanation. You just got yours ready faster than most. I wrote you every month." He was quiet. Every single month for 3 years. The letters came back. I know they did. I watched them come back. But I kept writing anyway because I needed you to know that somewhere someone was thinking about you every single day. Something shifted in his face. It was small, nearly invisible. But it was there. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the photograph. "Look at this," I said, and held it out to him. He did not move. "Eli, please." After a long moment, he took it from my hand. I watched his face as he studied the image. The silver-haired woman in the rocking chair. The sleeping baby in the yellow blanket. I watched him turn it over and read the words on the back, and I watched the walls behind his eyes begin to tremble. "Grandma," he whispered. "She kept this. All these years she kept this." He did not speak. "She died 8 months ago. She left us something, Eli. A piece of land in Montana. 43 acres. I don't know what it's worth. I don't know what any of it means yet. But I'm gonna find out." I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder. He tensed, but he did not pull away. "Come with me." "Why should I?" "Because you're my brother. Because we're the only family each other has. Because I'm not leaving you behind again. Not ever." The silence between us was heavy with years of hurt and misunderstanding, and all the letters that had come back unopened, and all the phone calls that had never connected, and all the distance that had been put between us by people making decisions about our lives, as if we were inconveniences to be organized rather than children to be loved. Finally, Eli looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "If this is some kind of trick, it's not a trick. I swear." He looked down at the photograph one more time, at the woman with silver hair and tears on her cheeks, at the baby with the tiny curled fist. He nodded once, a small, sharp movement. "Okay," he said. "I'll come." The Greyhound bus to Montana left at midnight from the Granger Falls station. It was a rusted waiting room with plastic chairs and a vending machine that took your money and gave you nothing. Eli slept through most of the journey, his head resting against the cold window, his breath making small clouds on the glass. I stayed awake, watching the darkness unspool outside, watching the plains give way to foothills, and the foothills begin their slow suggestion of mountains. I thought about Ruth Maddox, my grandmother. Fragments of her surfaced like wreckage from a ship that had gone down so long ago. The ocean had almost forgotten it was ever there. The smell of something sweet baking. A voice humming old hymns in a low, steady register. Hands that were soft and wrinkled and extraordinarily gentle. I had been 4 years old the last time I saw her. Eli had been 6 months old. Our mother, Clara, had packed us into a car in the middle of the night and driven until the sun came up, and she had never explained why. A year later, Clara was dead. A car accident, the police report said. Route 7 outside of Granger Falls. Wet road, poor visibility. A tragedy. These things happened. After that, Eli and I became wards of the state. We were placed together in the beginning, small enough that foster families were willing to take us both. But as the years went by and I grew older and harder to manage, and Eli stayed small enough to be manageable alone, the separations began. I was 15 the last time I lived under the same roof as my brother. He was 11. And then the Hendersons made their decision. And everything after that was letters that came back unopened. I pulled the photograph from my pocket and studied it in the dim light of the bus. She looked kind Ruth Maddox. She looked like someone who would have loved us fiercely if she had been given the chance. Like someone who had already been loving us quietly and from a distance for a very long time. What happened to you, Grandma? I thought. Why didn't you come? The bus rolled on. By the time we reached Harlow County, the sky had turned the pale gray of early morning. We stepped off at a gas station that served as the county's unofficial bus depot and stood on the concrete apron, breathing air that was sharper and cleaner than anything I had inhaled in years. It smelled of pine resin and cold earth and distances too vast to comprehend. Eli stood beside me with his hands in the pockets of his oversized jacket and looked at the mountains rising against the lightening sky. "Now what?" he asked. "Now we find the county clerk's office," I said. The office of Harlow County Land Records was located in a squat brick building next to the post office on the town's single main street. The town itself was called Millhaven Population 3,400, according to a sun-bleached sign at the town limits, though looking at the empty sidewalks and the number of darkened storefronts, I suspected the number was generous. A feed store with faded signage, a diner with red vinyl booths, a hardware store with a handwritten open sign in the window. Inside the county office, the air smelled of old paper and stale coffee. A woman sat behind the counter reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, a stack of manila folders at her elbow. She had gray hair cut practically short, and the bearing of someone who had been doing the same important job for long enough that she had stopped finding it necessary to explain herself to anyone. She looked up when we came in, and her expression did not change. "Help you." I slid the tax notice across the counter. I'm here about this property. Ren Cole. This is my brother Eli. I paused. Ruth Maddox was our grandmother. She took the document and studied it, typed something into a computer so old it made a sound like a small aircraft preparing for departure. The monitor cast a greenish glow across her face. Maddox, Lot 4743, 43 acres. Structure on site. Back taxes of $7. She looked at me over her glasses. I'm Marjorie Pell. I've been clerk of this county for 32 years. Ren Cole, I said again. We came to pay the taxes. Marjorie Pell looked at me for a moment. Then she looked at Eli. Then she looked back at me with the expression of someone who has lived long enough to recognize exactly what they are looking at when they see it. You know, she said slowly, someone else has been asking about this property. The air in the room seemed to shift. Who? I asked. Man in an expensive suit. Came by 3 times in the past 8 months. First time was within a week of your grandmother passing. Said he represented a development company, wanted to know when the property would go to county auction, if no heir came forward. Her jaw tightened slightly. I told him it was none of his business, and that the heir had first right of refusal for a period of 12 months. Did he give a name? Wouldn't. Which tells you something about a person in my experience. She picked up a heavy rubber stamp and pressed it down on a form with a sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. He didn't like being told no. Kept asking about the structure on the property, whether anyone had been inside, whether the contents had been inventoried. She paused. He made me uneasy, and I've dealt with enough county business over 32 years. That very little makes me uneasy anymore. She set down the stamp and looked at me directly. You want to settle those taxes? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled $20 bill I had been carrying since Ms. Harker handed it to me along with the bus ticket. It was supposed to be my food money for the week, the entire amount I had to my name. I looked at it for a moment. Then I put it on the counter. Yes, I said. I want to settle them. Marjorie Pell made change from a metal box. The coins clinked with a kind of finality that I felt in my chest. She pushed a folded document across the counter, the deed Ruth Maddox's name on one line, Ren Cole and Eli Cole on another in fresh ink. She followed it with a hand-drawn map on a piece of copier paper, the route marked with a careful dotted line. Property is about 20 minutes out on the old service road. No county water or power connected, but your grandmother had her own well and a solar array. Both should still be functional. She paused. Ruth used to come in here every few months, paid her taxes in cash, asked about the 2 of you. She folded her glasses and looked at me steadily. I had to tell her we couldn't release information on wards of the state. Privacy regulations. She understood, but you could see it in her face every time. It broke her heart. I did not trust myself to speak. She asked about you every single time, Marjorie said, right up until she couldn't come anymore. She stood up and extended her hand across the counter. You watch yourself, Ren Cole, that man in the expensive suit. Something tells me he's not done asking questions. I shook her hand. We left. The road to Ruth Maddox's property wound through fields of golden grass that moved in the wind like something breathing in stands of lodgepole pine growing so thick and dark that the spaces between them looked like doorways into another world. The sky above was enormous, the kind of sky that only exists when the land is flat enough and the air is clear enough to let you see all the way to the edge of things. We had bought a truck, $200 from a farmer named Haskins, who ran a small operation outside of Millhaven and had an extra vehicle sitting behind his barn that he was willing to part with for cash and no paperwork. The truck was 1994, dark green with a crack in the windshield and a heating system that worked when it felt like it, but it ran. And in our current situation, running was everything. Eli sat in the passenger seat with the hand-drawn map on his knee, watching the landscape pass. He had not spoken much since we left the county office. He was thinking. I had learned in those few hours since finding him on the concrete bench that Eli thought carefully before he spoke, that he had learned in whatever rooms he had been given over the past 3 years to say nothing until he knew exactly what he meant and exactly what it would cost him. There, he said, pointing. A mailbox at the side of the road, rusted, leaning slightly to the left, the way things lean when they have been standing in one place through too many winters. The name Maddox, still visible in white letters faded to the color of old bone. Beyond it, a dirt track disappeared into a tunnel of overgrown vegetation, pine branches arching overhead, tall grass pressing in on both sides. The track itself barely wide enough for the truck. I turned in. We drove slowly, branches scraping against the roof and sides of the truck like something reluctant to let us pass. The track curved and then curved again, and then the trees opened up without warning, and I saw it for the first time. The structure sat at the center of a clearing roughly 2 acres across, surrounded by wild grass that had grown tall and then bent over in layers, giving the ground a thick, soft appearance. The building itself was a Quonset hut, a military surplus half-cylinder of corrugated steel maybe 60 feet long, its curved roof almost entirely concealed by a dense layer of vines and creeping plants that had been trained so carefully, so deliberately, that the whole structure looked exactly like a natural hill rising from the ground. From the road, you would never know it was there. Someone had hidden this place on purpose. I stopped the truck and got out. The silence was immense. No traffic, no voices, no machinery, just the wind moving through the grass and the distant call of a hawk circling somewhere high above. I stood in the middle of that silence and breathed it in and felt something I had not felt in a very long time and could not immediately name. Then Eli said, "Ren." I turned. He was standing beside the truck, pointing at something near the side of the structure. A dog was sitting in the tall grass at the edge of the clearing watching us, old gray around the muzzle moving carefully when it finally stood, its joints making their age known. Its coat was the color of late autumn honey. Its eyes were dark and calm and held in them something that looked improbably like recognition. It did not bark. It did not run. It sat there as if it had been expecting us, as if it had been waiting. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down. "Hey there. It's okay." The dog walked toward me with the unhurried deliberateness of an animal that has decided you are not a threat. It pressed its muzzle against my open palm and let out a long, slow breath, a sound that carried something in it, relief or exhaustion or both, as if it had been holding that breath for a very long time. I turned the tag on its collar toward the light. Biscuit. She kept a dog, Eli said quietly. She kept a lot of things, I said. I stood up. Biscuit turned and trotted toward the main entrance of the Quonset hut, looking back at us once over his shoulder, with the expectant expression of an animal that has been the keeper of a home for a long time and takes that responsibility seriously. We followed. The inside of the structure took the air directly out of my lungs. I had expected abandonment. I had expected 8 months of emptiness to have done what emptiness always does, settled into everything. Like dust, turned every surface gray, made the air heavy with the particular smell of a place where nothing living has been for a long time. Instead, I walked into a world that was quietly, insistently alive. Light came through skylights set into the curved roof. 3 of them recently cleaned the glass, clear enough that the October sun fell through in clean rectangles onto a concrete floor that had been swept. Not recently swept, but maintained regularly enough that there was no accumulation of debris. The air smelled of hay and animals and something green and growing. Along one wall, nesting boxes built from reclaimed lumber held 15 chickens that regarded us with the mildly offended dignity that chickens maintain regardless of circumstance. 3 goats stood in a low pen at the far end of the space, their rectangular pupils fixed on us with an expression of calm, ancient evaluation. And in the center of the hut, arranged in a careful grid, a series of large plastic tanks, bubbled with water, and within them, catching the skylight, the flash and dart of silver scales. Fish. Live fish moving in healthy, purposeful arcs through clean water. Eli walked toward the tanks and stood looking down at them for a moment. "Someone has been taking care of this place," he said. Not a question. A statement of something that was becoming increasingly undeniably apparent. I walked to the work table that ran along the center of the space. On the concrete floor beneath it sat a water bowl. I crouched and pressed 2 fingers against the surface. The water was not cold. It was room temperature, which meant it had been poured within the past several hours. "Someone was here today," I said. Eli looked at me. "Someone is still coming." We did not have long to consider that. The structure had a partitioned living area at one end, a bed made up with clean sheets, and a quilt that had been pieced together from dozens of different fabrics. Each square a different pattern, as if it had been assembled from the remnants of other things that had once mattered. A small kitchen with a cast-iron wood stove, shelves of canned goods, organized by a Type A, hand-pumped water filter mounted above a deep farmhouse sink. A bathroom with a composting toilet and a solar water heater mounted outside the east wall of the structure. My grandmother had built herself a complete world out here. Self-sustaining, self-contained, hidden from the road and from whatever she had been hiding from. She had built it with care and with intention and with what must have been enormous patience, and she had left it running for 8 months after she was gone, because someone had been coming to keep it going. We would find out who later. First, there was the floor. Eli found it the loose board near the work table. He crouched down, pressed the edge, and felt it give. Looked up at me. We lifted the board together. In the hollow space beneath sat a wooden box. Hand-carved, the lid and sides covered in sunflowers rendered in such careful, loving detail that each petal had its own slight curve. each center packed with tiny individual seeds. The wood was dark with age and smooth from handling. Someone had run their fingers over those carved flowers so many times, the high points had taken on a gentle sheen. I thought about the hands that had made this. "Open it," Eli whispered. I unlatched the lid. The first thing I saw was the money. Old $100 bills rubber-banded into stacks, the bands dry and cracking with age. I did not count it then. I would learn later when I finally sat down with Eli and a yellow legal pad and counted every bill twice that it was exactly $50,000. The second thing was a letter folded and sealed in an envelope with our names on the front. Wren and Eli in handwriting that shook slightly the same handwriting as the back of the photograph. The third thing was a smaller box inside the larger one made of ordinary cardboard, its flaps folded over each other. I opened it and found envelopes, hundreds of them, all addressed to us at various addresses: foster homes, group facilities, county offices, all stamped in red ink. Return to sender. I picked one up, examined the postmark. November 2017. My name in Ruth Maddox's handwriting. Returned unopened. I picked up another. March 2019. Eli's name. Returned unopened. Another. She had written to us every week for more than a decade, and every letter had come back, and she had kept every one of them. The fourth thing in the box was a set of journals. 4 of them bound in dark leather so worn it had softened to the texture of old skin. I lifted them out carefully, the way you lift something you understand to be irreplaceable. Then I picked up the letter. Eli moved beside me, his shoulder pressing against mine. I could feel him breathing. I broke the seal and unfolded the pages. My dearest Wren and Eli, the letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally found your way home. I have been waiting for you. I have been waiting since the day you were taken from me. I stopped reading. My vision had blurred. Beside me, Eli made a sound so quiet, it was almost not a sound at all. I know what you must think of me. I know you must believe I abandoned you, that I stayed away because I chose to, that I did not love you enough to fight. I need you to understand that nothing could be further from the truth. Your father, Raymond, was not a good man. I tried to tell your mother this, but Clara loved him, and love makes us blind to the darkness in the people we have chosen to stand beside. By the time she saw him clearly, it was too late. Raymond had become involved with dangerous people. He owed them money, large amounts accumulated over years of decisions he did not share with anyone. And when he could not pay, they came looking. I was there the night they came to your mother's apartment. I saw their faces. I heard what they wanted. They were looking for money Raymond had hidden, and they believed Clara knew where it was. I knew that if they found her, they would find you. So I gave your mother every cent I had and told her to run, to take you somewhere safe and never look back. I stayed behind. I sold my house. I made noise. I let them believe I was the one with the information, with access to whatever Raymond had hidden away. It worked for a time, but men like that are patient. They found me eventually, and when they did, they made it very clear that they would be watching me, always waiting for me to make a move that would lead them somewhere useful. I could not contact your mother. I could not risk leading them to you. So I disappeared. I found this land under a different name. I paid cash. I built this place piece by piece over the course of years, telling myself that someday you would find it. Telling myself that love does not simply end because distance makes it impossible to express. The letter went on for several more pages. Ruth explained how she had learned of Clara's death through a newspaper notice that she had tried immediately to contact Montana Child Services, only to be told that as a maternal grandmother, with no established legal relationship to the children, she had no standing to petition for custody, that the system had processed us and placed us, and there was nothing she could do from the outside without drawing the kind of attention that would endanger us both. She explained about the man who had been asking questions about the property. His name was Victor Greer. He had been Raymond's business partner, the one who had escaped federal prosecution by cooperating with investigators by giving up enough of the operation to satisfy the government while keeping enough of his own history buried to walk away clean. Raymond was in prison because of decisions Victor had helped engineer. Victor was free because he had made himself useful at exactly the right moment. Your mother knew things about Victor, the letter said. Things that predated his cooperation agreement. Things the federal prosecutors had never been given, because Clara had not yet decided whether to come forward, whether the danger of doing so was worth the possibility of justice. She decided in the spring of 2012. She told me she was going. She called me from a payphone. She did not trust her own phone by then, and told me she had gathered what she had, that she was taking it to the police, that she thought it was finally time. I begged her to wait, to let me help her find a safer way. She said she was tired of waiting. The night she died, she was on her way to the Granger Falls police station. The accident on Route 7 was not an accident. I have spent years gathering proof of that. The proof is hidden here in this place. I have left careful instructions for where to find it. I need you to find it before Victor does. The final paragraphs of the letter were almost too painful to read. I am dying, my darlings. My heart is failing, and the doctors say there is nothing more to be done. I had hoped to live long enough to see you, to hold you one more time, to explain all of this in person, looking into your faces, so you could see in mine that every word I am telling you is true. But that is not going to happen. So I am leaving you this letter, this money, this farm. It is everything I have. It is not enough, I know that. 14 years is not something that can be repaid in land and dollars, but it is all I have to give. There is a man named Calhoun Briggs who lives down the road. He is my oldest friend. I have asked him to watch over this place until you come. Trust him. He is a good man. Be careful of Victor Greer. He knows this property exists now. He will come looking not for you but for what I have hidden. Do not let him find it. I have loved you every single day since the moment you were born. You were never abandoned. You were never forgotten. You were loved beyond all measure across every distance and every silence that was put between us. Find the truth. Find each other. And know that wherever I am still with you. All my love, forever. Grandma Ruth. I do not know how long we sat there. The light through the skylights moved from pale gold to deep amber, to the red of late afternoon. Biscuit lay down at our feet, pressing his warm weight against our legs. The chickens settled into their quiet sounds. The goats shifted and breathed. The fish turned slow circles in their tanks. Eli's head dropped onto my shoulder. His whole body shook with something he was trying very hard to contain. I put my arms around him and held on. And he let me, and I cried too quietly without drama. The way you cry when you have been holding something for so long that your arms simply cannot hold it anymore. I cried for the grandmother I had never really known. I cried for the mother who had died on her way to do the right thing. I cried for all the years of confusion and misplaced anger, and the long, hollow ache of believing that the people who should have loved us had simply decided not to. We had been wrong. We had been wrong about everything. That was the moment the door behind us opened. We both heard it, the scrape of a latch, the measured squeak of hinges. Biscuit lifted his head, and his tail began to move, not with alarm, with recognition. I stood up. A man filled the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, white-haired, cut military short. His face was the kind of face that outdoor decades produce, weathered, deeply lined, built for endurance rather than comfort. He was carrying a shotgun, and it was pointed at us with the practiced steadiness of someone who had held weapons before and knew precisely what they were for. "Don't move," he said. His voice was the sound of gravel under a slow wheel. "Who are you, and what are you doing in Ruth's house?" Biscuit had abandoned all pretense of dignity. He was at the man's feet, tail wagging hard enough to move his entire back half, making a sound that was somewhere between a whine and a greeting. The man looked down at the dog, then up at us. "We're her grandchildren," I said. I kept my voice level and my hands where he could see them. "Wren and Eli Cole. We have the deed. The property belongs to us now." His eyes narrowed. The gun did not move. "Prove it." I reached slowly into the envelope and held up the deed. He stared at it. His eyes moved from the document to my face, then to Eli's face. Something passed through his expression, a long, complicated movement of recognition and grief, and something that looked underneath both of those like relief. The shotgun lowered. The man's shoulders dropped. He crossed the space to the nearest chair and sat down in it heavily, as if his legs had simply decided they were done. He put one large, weathered hand over his face and sat there in the silence of the hut, in the last red light of the afternoon coming through the skylights, and did not speak for what felt like a very long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. "I promised her," he said. His voice had changed. The gravel was still there, but underneath it now was something older and much more exposed. "I promised I'd take care of this place until the right people came. She said I'd know them when I saw them." He looked at us both. "She talked about you every single day, had your pictures on the wall, read those letters that kept coming back, until the paper wore thin." Eli sat down slowly on the edge of the workbench. He was listening with his whole body. "You're Calhoun Briggs," I said. Cal, he said. Everyone calls me Cal. He cleared his throat. She mentioned me in the letter then. She said to trust you. Something moved through his expression at that. He pressed his lips together and looked at the floor for a moment before looking back up. Friend, he said as if testing the word. Is that what she called me? It was not a question. It was a man discovering what shape a thing had become by the time it reached its end. Biscuit padded over and pressed against Cal's legs, and the old man put one hand on the dog's head. And for a moment nobody spoke, and the hut was filled with nothing but the quiet sounds of living things, and the weight of everything that had happened in it, and the long, complicated silence of people who have only just begun to understand what they have actually found. I looked at the box on the workbench, at the stacks of returned letters, at the 4 leather journals, at the $50,000 and the carved sunflowers, and the handwriting that trembled with love and age, and the particular exhaustion of someone who had been holding on for a very long time. My grandmother had spent 14 years building this place, building this evidence, building a path back to us. Someone had killed our mother to stop the truth from coming out. And that same someone was now circling this property, asking questions, waiting for the moment it went to auction. I looked at Eli. He looked back at me. His eyes were still wet, but the walls behind them were different. Now, not gone, not healed, but changed in some fundamental way, rearranged by what we had read, by what we had held, by the understanding that the absence we had carried all our lives had never been indifference. It had been sacrifice. Cal, I said. The old man looked up. Tell us everything you know about Ruth, about this place, about what she was afraid of. I kept my voice steady. We have a lot of work to do. Cal talked until the wood stove needed feeding. He talked through the last of the afternoon light and into the blue hour of early evening, his voice low and steady, pausing occasionally to look at the floor or the wall or some middle distance where the past was apparently more visible than the present. Eli and I sat across from him and listened. Biscuit slept between us, twitching occasionally in whatever dreams old dogs inhabit. Cal had grown up in Lander County, the next territory over. Met Ruth Maddox. Ruth Calloway she was then at a church social in the spring of 1969, when they were both 17 and the world still felt like something that might be navigable if you just kept your head and worked hard and did not ask for more than your share. He had loved her from that first evening, the kind of love that 17-year-olds believe is the discovery of something universal, something that has always existed and will continue to exist regardless of what happens to the people who feel it. He was drafted 8 months later. He served 2 tours. When he came home, Ruth had married a man named Gerald Maddox. A decent man, Cal said, without rancor, just the plain statement of someone who has accepted a thing so completely that the bitterness has long since composted into something quieter. Cal bought a small property down the road, raised cattle, lived alone, and did not speak to Ruth for nearly 2 decades. Then, 20 years ago, she appeared at his door. Gerald was dead. Her daughter Clara was in serious trouble. The man Clara had married, Raymond Cole, had gotten himself involved with people who did not accept incomplete payments or late apologies. Everything was falling apart faster than Ruth could find the edges of it. She needed help, Cal said. So I helped. He had put up what money he had. Ruth had found this land 43 acres of high grass and pine and cold creek water, and had purchased it under a trust name that led nowhere obvious. She had hauled materials out here in a rented truck over the course of a summer, had framed the Quonset hut herself for the most part, accepting Cal's help with the heavy lifts and the electrical work and the moments when the project became too large for one set of hands. The aquaponics was her obsession, Cal said. She'd read everything she could find about it, said it was the future of small farming, said a closed-loop system like that could feed a family off almost nothing, no external inputs, no dependence on supply chains or weather or commodity prices. He paused. She never finished building it. Got the basics running the fish tanks, the basic irrigation to the growing beds, but the full system she had designed in those journals, the complete thing, she never got there. He looked at his hands. Her heart started failing about 2 years ago. She kept working anyway. But there's only so much a body will agree to. He stopped talking. The stove ticked in the silence. She made me promise, he said finally, that if her grandchildren ever came, I would not tell them what to do with this place, that I would just show them how it worked and let them decide. He looked at us both. So that's what I'm gonna do. We started the next morning. Cal arrived at 7 with a thermos of coffee and the unhurried purposefulness of someone who has been working land since before purposefulness required a name. He showed us the well hand dug deep, lined with stone producing water so cold it made your teeth ache. He showed us the solar array on the south-facing slope behind the hut. 8 panels in a fixed mount feeding a battery bank housed in a weatherproof box inside the structure. He showed us how to read the battery monitor, how to manage the load on cloudy days, what to turn off first when the reserves ran low. He showed us the animals. The goats were Nubian's Petra Olive, and a younger one Ruth had simply called the Kid, though the Kid was now nearly 2 years old and had apparently not been given a more permanent name because Ruth had been uncertain how long she would be around to use it. Cal showed me how to check their hooves and their eyes, how to read the signs of an animal that was off its feed, how to coax a reluctant goat onto a milking stand with a handful of grain and a tone of voice that communicated absolute confidence, even when you felt none. The chickens largely managed themselves, Cal said, but they needed consistent handling to stay calm. And calm chickens produced better eggs, and better eggs mattered when eggs were a primary protein source. Eli took to the fish. He spent the better part of the first 3 days crouched beside the tanks reading from Ruth's journals with the focused intensity of someone who has finally found a subject that speaks directly to whatever is most alive in him. Ruth's notes were meticulous: water chemistry, pH targets, ammonia cycles, stocking densities, the relationship between the fish waste and the bacteria that converted it, and the plants that consumed what the bacteria produced. It was a complete closed system, elegant in its logic, each element supporting every other. She designed this for the space, Eli said one evening, spreading one of the journals open on the work table and tracing a diagram with his finger. Look, she calculated the ceiling curve and used it. Most aquaponics setups are flat horizontal. She went vertical. Stacked growing beds here and here hanging from the structural ribs of the hut. The light from the skylights covers the whole vertical face. He looked up. It's smart. It's really smart. Can we build it? I asked. He looked back at the diagram, then at the partially completed infrastructure Ruth had left the pipes. The pump housings, the growing bed frames stacked against the wall waiting to be installed. Yes, he said. It'll take time, but yes. That was the first full sentence Eli had spoken to me without a wall behind it. Delia Briggs appeared on the second Thursday. She drove up the dirt track in a muddy pickup with a veterinary bag on the passenger seat, and her father's strong jaw, and the no-nonsense bearing of someone who has spent years dealing with animals in distress, and has learned that panic is the single most counterproductive response to any situation that requires clear thinking. She was 38, practical in every visible way, and she looked at us with the frank, assessing gaze of someone deciding in real time whether a situation required her immediate professional intervention. "Dad says you've got goats," she said. "Mind if I take a look?" She examined the goats with thorough efficiency, vaccinated the chickens checked. Biscuits joints with careful hands, and delivered a summary of each animal's condition with the brisk clarity of a doctor who respects her patient's time. "Ruth took good care of them," she said, washing her hands at the kitchen sink. "They're aging same as the rest of us. They'll need regular attention." She dried her hands and turned around. "I'll come back in 2 weeks, monthly after that. Don't worry about payment, consider it a favor to my father. He's happier than I've seen him in years." She looked at me directly. "Whatever you're doing here, keep doing it." She left without ceremony. She came back in 2 weeks as promised, and then again. And then the visits began to extend past the animals into the kitchen, into conversations that lasted through the afternoon, into a pattern that none of us had planned, but all of us had begun to depend on. Delia taught me to drive Ruth's old track properly in four-wheel drive and mud on the steep back section of the property, where the ground rose toward the tree line. She taught Eli to give subcutaneous injections in case of emergency, walking him through it on a patient goat with the calm authority of someone who trusts the person she is teaching. She became, without discussion or announcement, the older sister neither of us had ever had. We worked. Every day from the gray early light until the dark came down, we worked. Cal came most mornings. Delia on weekends. Eli and I between all of it, reading the journals, testing the water chemistry, failing at things and trying again and failing differently the next time, which Ruth's notes assured us was the correct direction of progress. The aquaponics project consumed us. We salvaged pipe fittings from the county dump and reclaimed lumber from a barn demolition 3 miles up the road. We drove 6 hours round trip to a fish hatchery and came home with tilapia fingerlings in sealed plastic bags, impossibly small and silver and alive. We filled the growing beds with expanded clay and planted seeds, lettuce, kale, spinach, 3 kinds of herbs, and watched the seeds do nothing for 2 weeks. And then, suddenly, everything. We failed constantly. A pump seal failed and drained half a tank before Eli caught it at midnight, wading ankle-deep in cold water in his socks. Cursing quietly and with impressive creativity, a pH swing killed the first batch of herbs before they reached 2 inches. A raccoon found a gap in the chicken enclosure, and we spent 4 hours at 3 in the morning repairing it by lantern light while the chickens registered their displeasure at significant volume. Eli threw a wrench across the hut one afternoon in late November. After the third time, a particular pipe coupling refused to seat correctly. It hit the far wall with a sound like a gunshot and clattered to the floor, and the hut went very quiet, and Eli stood with his hands at his sides, breathing hard. "I'll get it," I said. "I'll get it," he said. And he walked across the hut, picked up the wrench, came back, and tried the coupling again. It seated on the fourth attempt. He did not say anything. Neither did I. But something had shifted. The night the storm came, we were not prepared. It arrived without the warning that Montana weather usually provides no change in the pressure, no drop in the temperature through the afternoon, no shift in the color of the sky that Cal had taught us to read. One moment the evening was cold and clear, stars beginning to appear over the tree line. The next, the wind arrived, not gradually, all at once as if a door had been opened in the sky. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in 2 hours. The wind hit the curved metal roof of the Quonset hut like a physical assault, a sustained roar that made conversation impossible and thinking difficult. Snow came horizontal, visible in the beam of the security light Cal had installed over the entrance, a solid wall of white that reduced the world to 10 feet in every direction. I went to sleep telling myself the insulation on the pipes was adequate. I woke at 2 in the morning to silence, not the comfortable silence of a winter night, the wrong kind of silence, the silence of machines that have stopped. The pumps. I was across the hut in my socks before I was fully conscious, the cold of the concrete floor hitting me like a second waking. The pump housings were cold to the touch. I pressed my hand against the nearest pipe, frozen solid. I grabbed the lantern and moved to the fish tanks. The water surface had a skim of ice at the edges. The aerators had stopped. And the fish are tilapia, the ones we had driven 12 hours round trip to bring home, the ones Eli had watched over like they were made of something irreplaceable, were at the surface. Still. White-bellied. Every single one. I stood there with the lantern. I do not know how long I stood there. Eli found me an hour later sitting on the concrete floor beside the tanks with my back against the cold metal wall. He came from the sleeping area with a blanket around his shoulders, took one look at the tanks and stopped. The silence stretched. "They're all gone," I said. My voice sounded wrong, flat and distant. "We didn't insulate the secondary lines properly. The cold came through faster than the main insulation could hold, and the pumps couldn't draw and everything froze." I stopped. "We killed them." Eli sat down beside me on the floor. For a long time he did not speak. The storm had settled into a lower register outside, still heavy but no longer violent. The hut creaked and breathed around us. Then I heard him. He was crying. Quietly, the way he did everything, without performance, without announcement. Just the sound of it, real and unguarded in the cold dark of the hut. "I don't want to fail," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. "I don't want to lose this place. I can't go back to that group home Wren. I can't. I'd rather—" He stopped. "Don't," I said. "I mean it. I know you mean it." I turned toward him. "Which is exactly why we are not going to lose this place." He looked at me with red eyes. "Ruth spent years designing this system. She wrote down everything she knew. We have her notes, her calculations, her failure logs. Because she had failure logs, Eli. She had whole sections of the journals where she documented what went wrong and why, and what she did differently the next time. I held his gaze. We insulate the secondary lines. We install a backup heat circuit from the wood stove. We get more fish. I paused. This is our home. The cold doesn't get to take it. Nobody gets to take it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. Okay, he said. Okay. The storm lasted 2 more days. When it cleared, we ordered new tilapia from the hatchery. We pulled every secondary pipe and wrapped it in closed-cell foam insulation. We ran copper tubing from the wood stove through a heat exchanger that Cal helped us build over the course of a long, cold weekend, cursing the design twice and improving it once before it worked the way it needed to. We installed a temperature alarm on Eli's phone that would wake him if the fish tank readings dropped below threshold. We never lost another fish to the cold. And 3 weeks later, on a gray Tuesday morning in January, I was sitting at the work table reading through the third of Ruth's journals when I found it. A single page tucked into the back cover binding, not glued, not stapled, just folded and slipped into the gap between the leather and the cardboard. Backing invisible unless you were turning the journal over in your hands, and felt the faint irregularity of something that did not belong there. I pulled it out. It was written in Ruth's handwriting, but the letters were different. Not her normal cursive, something more deliberate. Each character carefully formed, the spacing precise and even. I stared at it for a moment before I understood what I was looking at. A substitution cipher. Simple. The kind a child could learn in an afternoon. Each letter replaced by another according to a fixed shift. And then it hit me, not gradually, but all at once, the way understanding sometimes arrives. Clara had taught me this. My mother. When I was 3 years old, sitting on a kitchen floor somewhere that I barely remembered, she had shown me how to write secret messages, how to shift each letter forward by 4 positions, so that only someone who knew the rule could read what you had written. She had called it our secret language. I had forgotten it completely until this moment, holding a page of my grandmother's handwriting and recognizing the pattern the way you recognize a face you have not seen in 30 years. Ruth had known. Clara had taught her daughter's secret language to her own mother, and Ruth had used it here in this hidden page because she wanted to make sure that the person who found it was someone who had a reason to know. My hands were shaking as I worked through it. I used a pencil in the back of an old envelope, translating letter by letter the way Clara had shown me in that half-remembered kitchen. It took me 40 minutes. When I finished, I read it twice to make sure I had it right. Victor Greer arranged the death of my daughter Clara Cole on March 3, 2012. I have in my possession an audio recording of Greer discussing the arrangement of this act. I have financial records connecting Greer to the money laundering operation for which Raymond Cole was convicted. I have correspondence linking Greer to the individual who caused the accident on Route 7. All of this evidence is stored on a USB drive in a waterproof container inside the main irrigation supply pipe near the primary water tank. The pipe is marked with a carved sunflower, small on the east-facing coupling joint. If you are reading this and I am gone, please finish what I started. There is a backup copy in my resting place should you need it. I have always believed in redundancy. I sat with the decoded message for a long time. Then I walked to where Eli was checking the growing beds, new seeds planted 3 days ago. Nothing visible yet, and I put the page in front of him without saying anything. He read it, then read it again. He looked up at me. "The pipe with the sunflower," he said. "Yes." "When?" "Tonight," I said. "After Cal leaves." Victor Greer knocked on our door on a Thursday evening in early February. I heard the knock and knew before I opened the door. Not rationally, there was no rational basis for it, but something in the quality of that knock, measured and deliberate and utterly unhurried, communicated an absolute confidence in its own right to be answered. I had been reading by the wood stove. Eli was at the work table with one of the journals. Biscuit lifted his head, and the sound that came from his throat was not the greeting he gave Cal or Delia. It was the lower register. The warning. I went to the door. The man standing in the snow was perhaps 55-60 at the outer edge. He was wearing a cashmere overcoat the color of charcoal. The kind of coat that costs more than a month's rent and has never been within 50 miles of actual weather before tonight. His hair was silver gray, precisely cut. His face was composed into an expression of pleasant reasonableness that had been practiced so long it had calcified into something almost convincing. Almost. "Good evening," he said. "I apologize for the late hour. My name is Victor Greer. I represent Ridgeline Development Partners." His smile was wide and white. "I believe you've recently inherited an interesting piece of property." I did not invite him in. He came in anyway, moving past me with the easy assurance of someone who has never been told no by anyone whose opinion he considered worth registering. He sat at our kitchen table as if he owned it, looked around the interior of the hut with the careful, cataloging gaze of someone performing a valuation, and turned his attention to me. "I'll get to the point," he said. "My company is interested in acquiring this property. We're prepared to offer $300,000. Cash. That's a life-changing amount of money for two young people in your situation." Behind me, I was aware of Eli setting down the journal. "The property isn't for sale," I said. Victor Greer's smile did not waver, but something behind his eyes made a small involuntary adjustment. A recalibration. The way a machine recalibrates when its initial measurement returns an unexpected result. "I understand the attachment," he said. "Your grandmother built something meaningful here, but you need to be realistic about your situation. You're living in an agricultural structure with no official permits, no utility connections of record. One complaint to the county assessor's office and the whole arrangement comes under review." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you a clean exit, a substantial amount of money, and the freedom to start somewhere that isn't a metal building in the middle of a Montana winter." "No," I said. The silence that followed was brief and very precise. Victor Greer sat back. He adjusted his cuffs. When he looked at me again, the pleasant reasonableness was still on his face, but it had thinned enough that what was underneath it had become faintly visible. Something cold, something that had been making calculations since the moment he walked through the door. "Let me offer a different perspective," he said. His voice had dropped perhaps half a register. "Your father, Raymond, is scheduled for release in 2 weeks. I imagine he'll be eager to reconnect with his children. A man in his position with his history, He'll need somewhere to land. He paused. Unless, of course, someone made sure he understood that his presence in your lives wouldn't be welcome. That looking for you would be inadvisable. He stood buttoning his coat with unhurried precision. Think about my offer. I'll be in touch. He walked to the door, paused, turned back to look at us one final time. Your grandmother was a stubborn woman, he said. She held on to things that weren't worth holding on to. I always thought that was her greatest flaw. He let the pause land. Look where it got her. The door closed. Eli was on his feet before the sound had finished echoing. His voice came out low and tightly controlled, which was more frightening than shouting. He killed her, he said. He's standing here in her house, and he's talking about her like he killed Mom. And now he's coming after us, and we're just supposed to... Eli. I stepped in front of him, put both hands on his shoulders. Listen to me. He wants a reaction. He wants us scared or angry, or both, because scared and angry people make mistakes. I held his gaze. We are not going to make mistakes. He was breathing hard. His hands were fists at his sides. We have the USB drive, I said, quietly. Or we will have it. And we are going to make sure that it goes where it needs to go. And we are going to do that carefully and correctly. And Victor Greer is going to spend the rest of his life in a federal facility. I tightened my grip on his shoulders. But only if we do this right. Do you understand me? A long moment. Eli exhaled. Yes, he said. 3 days later, my phone showed an unknown number. A photograph. Eli walking down Millhaven's main street, a bag of feed store supplies in both arms, smiling at something off camera. The angle was from inside a vehicle parked across the street. He was completely unaware of it. Below the photograph, a single line of text. Nice town. Shame if something happened to it. I sat with the phone in my hand for a very long time. Then I called Marjorie Pell. She answered on the second ring. I told her about Victor's visit, about the photograph, about the single line of text. I told her everything in the order it had happened without embellishment or panic. She listened without interrupting, which is the mark of someone who understands that the time for questions is after all the information is on the table. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Come see me tomorrow morning, she said. 8 o'clock. Come alone. I was at the county office at 10 to 8. Marjorie Pell was already there, her reading glasses on the desk beside her, rather than on her face, which I had learned was her signal that she intended to look at you directly and without the buffer of professional distance. She had a small cardboard box on the counter. Security camera, she said. Motion-activated wireless connects to your phone. I had it in my garage. Never got around to installing it. She pushed the box toward me. We're going to put it at the entrance to your property, in the tree line where it won't be visible from the road. Marjorie, I've worked in this county for 32 years, she said. I've watched men like Victor Greer operate. They count on people like you feeling isolated, feeling like they have no resources and no allies. She looked at me steadily. You have allies. Now go home and come back tomorrow with your brother, so I can show you both how to set this up properly. That night, after Cal had gone back to his place down the road and Eli was asleep, I went to the irrigation supply line. The main pipe ran along the east interior wall of the hut, a 4-inch diameter PVC line that fed the primary water distribution for the aquaponics system. I had been looking at it for weeks without seeing what Ruth had hidden in plain sight, because you only see what you know to look for, and I had not known to look until tonight. The east-facing coupling joint 12 inches from the primary tank. I crouched down and brought the lantern close. There it was, cut into the PVC barely a centimeter across the lines, so fine they looked like a manufacturing mark if you were not already looking for them. A sunflower. 8 petals, a round center. The whole thing no larger than my thumbnail. I got the wrench. My hands were steadier than I expected. I seated the wrench on the coupling, applied pressure, slowly felt the joint resist, and then release. Water dripped from the threads as I turned it. I set the coupling aside and reached into the pipe with 2 fingers. The container was there. Cylindrical, waterproof, sealed with a bead of silicone around the cap. I worked it free and set it on the floor, and sat back on my heels and looked at it for a moment. This was what Victor Greer had been circling for 8 months. This was what our mother had died for. I opened the container. The USB drive inside was wrapped in a layer of electrical tape and then a layer of plastic sheeting sealed tight, bone dry. I reassembled the pipe coupling, took the drive to my cot, lay there until the wood stove burned low and the hut was cold and quiet, turning the small rectangle of plastic over in my fingers. In the morning, I woke Eli before Cal arrived. We drove to Millhaven. The public library opened at 9. We were the first ones through the door, and we went to the back row of computers, where the angle from the front desk made it impossible to see our screens, and I plugged in the drive. The files were organized in dated folders going back to 2013. Financial records, photographs, scanned documents, correspondence, and at the end of the file list, a single audio file. March 1st, 2012. 2 days before our mother died on Route 7. I plugged in the earbuds and divided them, one in my ear, one in Eli's. I pressed play. The recording was made on an old device, the audio slightly compressed, background noise present, but manageable. 2 voices. One I did not recognize, measured flat, transactional. The other I recognized from our kitchen table. Victor Greer. The problem on Route 7 has been handled, he said. His voice was the same as it had been in our kitchen, composed precise, utterly certain of itself. Clara won't be making it to the station. I've arranged for an incident on the eastbound approach. Wet road conditions, low visibility. By the time anyone looks closely, there'll be nothing to look at. A pause. The other voice. And the evidence she was carrying. Victor. Gone. There's no chain of custody. Nothing admissible. Nothing that connects back to the operation or to us. A longer pause. Then the second voice said, "Just make sure the kids never find out." The room tilted. Because the second voice, the voice saying, "Just make sure the kids never find out," was one I had heard through the walls of foster homes in my earliest memories. A voice I associated with a smell of engine oil and a particular kind of laugh that never quite matched the situation that produced it. Raymond Cole. Our father had known. He had not been a weak man caught in circumstances beyond his control. He had sat across a phone line 2 days before our mother drove toward a police station, carrying evidence that could have saved herself, and he had said, "Just make sure the kids never find out." And then he had let it happen. I pulled the earbud out. Eli was sitting beside me, completely still in the way that very still things are still when they are working very hard at containing something that has no appropriate external form. He did not speak. Neither did I. We sat in the quiet of the library while the morning light came through the windows and other people arrived and began their ordinary days around us. And I held the USB drive in my closed fist and felt the full weight of what Ruth had spent 14 years building, what Clara had died trying to deliver, what Victor Greer had been trying to bury since before either of us were old enough to understand what burying meant. I thought about Marjorie Pell and the security camera in its cardboard box. I thought about Cal Briggs and the 9 men from the VFW Hall in Millhaven, whose names I did not yet know, but would. I thought about a backup copy in my resting place should you need it. I have always believed in redundancy. I looked at Eli. He looked back at me with Raymond Cole's eyes and Clara Cole's jaw, and the particular expression of someone who has just learned that the story they thought they were living is both worse and more navigable than they understood. "We need to talk to Marjorie," I said. He nodded once. And then I said, "We need to set a trap." Marjorie Pell listened to everything without moving. We sat across from her in the county office after hours, the blinds drawn, the overhead fluorescence replaced by the softer light of a desk lamp. She had angled toward the wall. She had locked the front door when we came in and had not unlocked it since. On the desk between us sat the USB drive, the decoded page from Ruth's journal, and a legal pad on which I'd written every date and event in the order they had occurred, starting from the morning of my 18th birthday and ending with the audio file we had heard in the library that morning. Marjorie read the legal pad. She looked at the decoded page. She did not ask to listen to the audio file. "I'll take your word on what's in it," she said. "For now." She leaned back in her chair. "What I need you to understand is that this recording on its own is not enough. Chain of custody matters. A USB drive found in a pipe on private property by the heirs of the woman who put it there. Victor Greer's lawyers will spend 6 months arguing it was manufactured, planted, edited. They will argue it until a jury is too exhausted and confused to know what they believe." She looked at me. "You need him to say something new, something recent, something that can't be explained away as old audio from a dead woman's hiding place." "He wants the property," I said. "He wants what he believes is on the property," Marjorie corrected. "He doesn't know you've already found the drive, which means right now Victor Greer is operating on the assumption that the evidence is still in that pipe, and that if he can acquire the property through legal means or simply take what he needs through other means, the problem goes away." Eli was watching her. "You're saying we use that?" "I'm saying you have approximately 1 window," Marjorie said. "Once he suspects you found it, that window closes. He'll move to discredit you, to create legal obstacles to make your claim to this property complicated enough that you run out of money before the courts sort it out." She paused. But right now, tonight, he still thinks he has time. She pulled a notepad toward her and wrote a name and a number. Sheriff Dale Pruitt, she said. He's been in this county 20 years. He is not a complicated man, which is his greatest virtue. He believes in evidence he can hold in his hand. You bring him something he can hold in his hand, and he will act on it without requiring a political calculation. She pushed the notepad across the desk. But you don't call him yet. You call him when you have something new. Something Greer says or does that happened after today. She looked at us both for a long moment. Go home, she said. Install that camera and wait. We drove back to the property in the dark. The temperature had dropped again. The sky the particular clear black of a Montana February night, when the cold has pressed all the moisture out of the air and left nothing between you and the stars. Eli installed the camera while I held the lantern wedged into the fork of an old ponderosa pine 30 feet from the gate, aimed down the entry track, its wireless signal reaching the receiver inside the hut. I watched the camera feed appear on my phone, a green-tinted rectangle of driveway in infrared. The gatepost visible at the left edge, the track disappearing into darkness beyond. If anyone comes up that road, I said, we'll know. Eli climbed down from the tree. He brushed pine bark from his jacket and looked at the camera and then at me. I've been thinking about Dad, he said. I waited. He knew, Eli said. He sat there on the phone and he said those words, and then he went to prison for the money laundering, and the whole time he knew why Mom was dead, and he never said anything. He was quiet for a moment. That's not weakness, that's a choice. Yes, I said. It is. Are we going to use him? I thought about Raymond Cole testifying, about what it would cost him and what it might mean, and whether any of it balanced in any way that resembled justice. If he'll do it, I said. Why would he? I thought about what Ruth had written in the letter, about the visit she had made to Raymond in prison, the one he had not mentioned, and she had recorded as a single quiet paragraph near the end of her account. She had sat across from him and looked at him and told him what his punishment was. Not the prison sentence, the real one. Because Ruth already had this conversation with him, I said. She already told him what he owed. I think he's been waiting for someone to give him the chance to pay some portion of it back. I called the prison the next morning. The process of arranging a communication with an inmate in the federal system is not simple, but Marjorie had given me the right forms and the right office and the right language to use, and 3 days later I was sitting in the county office with a phone on speaker, and Raymond Cole's voice coming through it for the first time in my life. He sounded older than I had imagined, quieter. I did not introduce myself with warmth. I told him who I was and what we had found and what I needed from him. I told him about the audio recording. I told him that his voice was on it. The silence on his end lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "She found it." "She found everything," I said. Another silence. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. I told him. He said yes without negotiating the terms. The trap was simple in its design and required absolute precision in its execution. The USB drive we had recovered from the pipe was the original Ruth's copy, the one she had assembled over years of careful documentation. I made 2 copies on drives I bought from the hardware store in Mill Haven. one of which I gave to Marjorie, and one of which I kept. Then I put a third drive blank identical in appearance to the original into the waterproof container, resealed the silicone, and reinstalled it in the pipe behind the sunflower coupling. If Victor Greer sent someone to take it, they would take a blank drive. If Victor Greer came himself, I wanted to know about it. I called Cal. I did not tell him everything at first. I told him that we had reason to believe someone might try to access the property without permission, that it would likely happen at night, and that I would appreciate knowing whether he had contacts in the area who might be willing to be on standby. I said it calmly and practically, the way Ruth's journals had taught me to approach problems that required clear thinking. Identify the variable. Identify the resource, match them. Cal was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How many people do you need?" "Enough that no one tries anything once they see them," I said. Another pause. "I'll make some calls," he said. He called back 2 hours later. 9 men, all retired military, all local, all of whom had known Ruth Maddox either directly or through Cal, and considered what had been done to her daughter a matter that had gone without adequate response for far too long. They would be ready on 2 hours' notice. They would bring their own vehicles and their own means of persuasion. I called Marjorie and told her the plan. She listened. When I finished, she said, "The moment anything happens on that property, you call Dale Pruitt. Not before gives Greer's lawyers something to argue about. But the moment his people set foot on your land, you call. And I will already have spoken to Dale about the background, and he will come. You'll talk to the sheriff before." "I'll talk to Dale tonight," she said. "He's an old friend. I'll give him enough to understand the situation without giving him enough that he's obligated to act before you're ready." A pause. "This needs to end cleanly. For you. For what Ruth built." We waited 4 days. On the 4th night, I dreamed about Clara. She was standing in a field of sunflowers, the stalks so tall they came to her shoulders, the flowers all turned toward a sun I could not see. She was reaching toward me across a distance that did not change, regardless of how far I extended my own arm. She was saying something, her mouth moving with the particular emphasis of words that matter, but no sound was reaching me. I kept trying to close the distance. It kept refusing to close. Then, Biscuit's growl cut through everything. I was on my feet before I was conscious. The sound that came from his throat was the lowest register I had ever heard from him. Not alarm exactly, but the ancient certain signal of an animal that has identified a threat and is communicating that information to the members of its household. I checked my phone. The camera feed showed 3 shapes moving up the entry track, not vehicles on foot moving single file each, carrying a flashlight aimed at the ground. Dark clothing, deliberate practice movement. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. I pressed the call button for Cal. 1 ring, then his voice fully alert as if he had been waiting by the phone. 3 on foot, I said. Coming up the track now. Give me 15 minutes. I woke Eli. He was sitting up before I finished saying his name because that is who my brother had become over the course of these months. Someone who had learned to hold a light sleep to be ready to respond before his body had finished the transition from unconscious to present. He looked at me in the dark, I showed him the phone screen. He nodded. We moved to the far side of the hut behind the growing bed frames that lined the east wall, and we waited. Biscuit came with us, pressed against my leg. The growl in his throat reduced to a vibration I could feel through my hand on his back. The side door, the equipment access lower than the main entrance facing east, opened without a sound. Whoever they were, they had scouted the property well enough to know about the secondary entrance. 3 figures came through in sequence, flashlights sweeping the space in practiced arcs. And then, framed in the doorway, a 4th figure, not moving with the others, standing still in the entrance, letting them do the work while he observed. His cashmere coat was gone, replaced by something darker and more practical. But the posture was unmistakable. The absolute physical certainty of a man who has always had more resources than whoever he is standing across from. Victor Greer. He had come himself. One of the 3 men had already found the main irrigation line. He was crouched at the coupling joint, a flashlight in one hand, a set of pipe tools in the other. I heard the metallic sound of the wrench seating. Eli's hand found my arm in the dark. I felt him tense, felt the decision forming in his body before his body had finished making it. Eli. I breathed. He was already moving. He came out from behind the growing frames at a full run, shouting something I could not fully parse, a single compressed syllable of anger and grief. And 14 years of being told that the things that mattered to him were not his to keep. He was across the hut in 4 seconds. The nearest man turned and caught him before he reached the pipe, one arm locking around his torso, lifting him off the ground. A second man stepped in, pulling the shovel from Eli's hands, and in moments my brother was face down on the concrete, with a knee between his shoulder blades and a hand gripping the back of his jacket. He was not struggling. He had gone still. I walked out from behind the growing frames. Victor Greer looked at me. The expression on his face was not surprise. It was the mild managerial displeasure of someone dealing with a delay rather than a complication. "I was hoping you'd be sensible," he said. "Stay inside, let this be finished. Move on with your lives." He glanced at Eli on the floor. "Now I have to make decisions I'd rather not make." "Let him up," I said. "In a moment." He nodded toward the man at the pipe. "Finish." I heard the coupling release, the sound of the container being worked free. Then, got it. Victor Greer's expression resolved into something that was almost satisfaction. The lights came on, not gradually. All at once from multiple directions, flooding through the skylights and the equipment entrance, and through the east-facing windows that Ruth had installed to maximize winter light, an onslaught of illumination from 6 sets of vehicle headlights positioned around the perimeter of the clearing, aimed inward, turning the Montana dark into something closer to noon. Through the open equipment door, I could see them. Pickup trucks and older SUVs parked at angles that closed every exit from the property. Men standing beside them, not moving, not speaking, just present in the absolute and unhurried way that people who have been in difficult situations before are present without the agitation that comes from not knowing how things will resolve. Cal Briggs stood at the center of the entrance, his silhouette backlit by the headlights behind him. He was not carrying the shotgun this time. He did not need to. "Step away from those children," he said. His voice carried the particular authority of someone who spent years giving orders in circumstances where the alternative to being obeyed was unacceptable. Victor Greer's men looked at each other. They were professional in some sense of the word. They had moved through the dark with skill. They had located the pipe quickly. They had controlled Eli efficiently. But they were also doing a rapid and unfavorable calculation about the current arithmetic of the situation. And professional people, unlike ideological ones, respond to arithmetic. The man holding Eli released him and stepped back. Eli got to his feet without assistance. His jaw set, his eyes on Victor Greer. Victor had not moved. He was looking at the assembled vehicles, at the men beside them, at Cal, in the entrance, with the expression of someone recalculating a position they had believed was secured. "This is trespassing on private property," I said. My voice came out steady. I was grateful for that. "You have a stolen USB drive in the pocket of whoever took it from that pipe. You have 3 men who just entered this structure without permission. And you have a recording of yourself arranging the death of Clara Cole that has already been copied to 2 secure locations." Victor's composure did not break, but it thinned. The pleasant surface of it thinned until you could see clearly what was underneath. And what was underneath was not the cold certainty I had expected. It was calculation, rapid, desperate, and for the first time since he had walked into our kitchen, in his cashmere coat, uncertain. "You have nothing admissible," he said. "I have a phone in my brother's pocket that has been recording since the moment your people came through that door," I said. "Which means I have you tonight directing men to enter private property and remove evidence from a structure you do not own. That's new, Mr. Greer. That happened after today. That's exactly what we needed." Blue and red light bloomed at the end of the entry track. 2 sheriff's department vehicles came up the road and pulled into the clearing with the particular unhurried authority of people arriving at a situation that has already resolved itself and simply requires documentation. Sheriff Dale Pruitt was a large man in his late 50s, broad in the shoulders with the deliberate movements of someone who has learned that urgency is almost always counterproductive. He took in the scene, the trucks, the men, Cal in the entrance, Victor Greer standing at the center of it with a container in his man's hand and nowhere useful to stand. He walked toward Victor with the steady pace of inevitability. "Victor Greer," he said. Not a question. "Sheriff, there's been a misunderstanding." "You can explain it to me at the station," Pruitt said. "Hands where I can see them, please." It took 40 minutes to process the scene. Pruitt's deputies documented everything: the forced entry through the equipment door, the pipe coupling and tools, the container with the blank drive inside, the phone recording from Eli's pocket. Victor Greer was handcuffed and walked to a cruiser without drama, his composure intact, but his eyes moving in the way that eyes move when a person is reviewing the decisions of the past hour and finding all of them wanting. His 3 men followed in separate vehicles. When the cruisers had turned out of the property and the lights of Pruitt's vehicles had disappeared down the service road, the clearing was quiet. Cal's men dispersed without ceremony, climbing back into their trucks, exchanging brief words, driving away into the Montana dark. The way people leave when a thing that needed doing has been done, and there is nothing more to say about it. Cal stood in the clearing for a moment after the last truck left. He looked at me. He looked at Eli. He looked at the hut behind us with its lights on, and its animals settled, and its fish turning slow circles in their tanks. Ruth would have appreciated the efficiency of that, he said. Then he went home. Eli and I sat on the floor of the hut for a long time after. Biscuit between us, his warm weight against our legs. The wood stove ticked. The fish moved in their quiet arcs. The goats shifted and settled. We did not speak for a while. "The backup copy," Eli said eventually. "Tomorrow," I said. Her resting place was at the back of the property where the cleared land met the tree line and the pines grew close and quiet. A simple stone set into the ground level rather than rising from it. Ruth had specified this in the last pages of the 4th journal, in a section marked Practical Matters. Her initials and 2 dates and the words, "Finally Home," in plain capital letters. No ornamentation beyond those 2 words, which were ornamentation enough. We had not visited since arriving. I was not sure why. Perhaps because visiting felt like an ending and we had not been ready for endings. Perhaps because finding the stone would make permanent something we had been holding at a slight distance. We went in the morning before Cal arrived. The ground was frozen, the grass pale and stiff with frost. The sky the pale gray of a Montana winter morning that has not yet decided what it intends to become. Biscuit walked with us without being called, moving at my left side with the measured pace of an old animal that knows where it is going. The stone was there. Ruth Maddox, 1952, 20:25. Finally home. I stood in front of it for a moment. Felt the cold coming through my boots and my jacket and settling into the place in my chest where something had been sitting for 14 years without a name. Then I crouched and pressed my palm flat against the frozen ground 6 inches in front of the stone, and I felt the slight give of soil that had been disturbed more recently than the surrounding ground. I found the edge of a flat board pressed into the earth, sealed against moisture, with a bead of dark compound. Lifted it. The container was there, identical to the one from the pipe, sealed with the same silicone, the same care, the same absolute faith that the person who found it would know what to do with it. I have always believed in redundancy. I held it in both hands for a moment. Ruth Maddox had planned for the possibility that they would find the first copy and destroy it. She had planned for the possibility that her own careful work would be undone by the same violence that had undone her daughter. She had prepared for that possibility with the same methodical patience she had applied to every other aspect of what she had built here. And she had put the backup where the person she trusted most would think to look, at her feet, knowing we would come. I handed the container to Eli. He held it with both hands, looking down at it, and I watched the same calculation move through his face that I felt moving through mine. The weight of what it meant, the cost at which it had been kept, the woman who had maintained faith in its necessity for more than a decade. "She never stopped," he said. "No," I said. "She never did." We brought both drives to Marjorie that morning. She made calls. By afternoon, a federal investigator had driven up from Billings and was sitting in a conference room at the Harlow County building, listening to the audio file on a laptop with the careful, expressionless attention of someone conducting a formal assessment of something important. The investigation took 8 months. Victor Greer hired 3 attorneys. He filed motions to suppress the audio recording on the grounds that it had been obtained without a warrant. Motions that were denied on the grounds that the recording had been made in 2012. And Ruth Maddox had been a party to the conversation. Her device, her recording, her right. He filed motions to challenge the chain of custody of the digital evidence motions that were answered by Marjorie Pell's testimony about the condition of the drives when she received them, and the federal examiner's report on their integrity. He filed motions to exclude Eli's phone recording from the night at the property. These were denied. What happened on our land that night was documented by 9 witnesses, 2 sheriff's deputies, a county official, and 17 seconds of unambiguous audio in which Victor Greer directed his employees to remove evidence from a property he did not own. He had spent 30 years making problems disappear. Ruth Maddox had spent 14 years making it impossible for this one to disappear. Raymond Cole testified via secure video link from the Federal Correctional Facility in Colorado. He had aged in the photographs I had found of him from the time of his original trial. Not gently, but the way people age when they have been carrying something that does not allow for rest. He sat in front of the camera in a prison-issue shirt and looked at the courtroom through the screen with the eyes of someone who has had a very long time to understand precisely what he is. He told the jury everything. He told them about the money laundering operation, about Victor Greer's role in constructing it, about the people who had been defrauded, and the mechanisms by which the fraud had been sustained. He told them about the night he learned that Clara had decided to go to the police about the phone call with Victor, about what was said. He did not soften it. He did not frame it as something that had happened to him. He said, "I knew. I was on that call. I said what I said, and then I did nothing, and my wife is dead because of what I chose." His voice cracked on the last sentence. He did not recover it. He finished his testimony with his voice broken, and the courtroom was very quiet when the connection ended. The jury deliberated for 3 days. I was in the courthouse in Billings when the foreman stood and read the verdict. I was sitting in the 3rd row of the gallery with Eli on my left and Marjorie Pell on my right, and Cal Briggs directly behind me, his hand on the back of my seat. I had not slept well in 3 days. I had spent the deliberation period doing exactly what Ruth's journals recommended for periods of acute uncertainty working: checking the fish tanks, repairing a drip in the greenhouse irrigation, planting a new flat of seedlings that would not be ready to transplant for 6 weeks, which required believing that in 6 weeks there would still be something to transplant them into. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Conspiracy to commit murder. Witness tampering. Obstruction of justice. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Victor Greer to 28 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 20. I watched them lead him out of the courtroom in handcuffs. His expensive suit was rumpled from days of sitting in a holding cell. His silver hair, which had been so precisely cut the night he appeared at our door, had grown out unevenly. His face, as the deputies walked him past the gallery, was composed into the blankness of someone who has run out of calculations and is now simply enduring the arithmetic of consequence. He did not look at us. Outside the courthouse in the cold Billings afternoon, Cal put one hand briefly on my shoulder. Marjorie shook my hand with both of hers. which I had come to understand was her highest expression of warmth. Eli stood beside me on the courthouse steps and tilted his face up toward the pale winter sky for a moment. His eyes closed. The case against Raymond Cole for his role in the conspiracy was resolved separately. He received an additional 2 years added to his existing sentence. His cooperation and testimony considered mitigating factors, and was relocated to a facility in Colorado. We were informed of this by letter. 6 months after the sentencing, a letter arrived from that facility. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope. I had seen it on a legal pad submitted as evidence on the official statement he had given to federal investigators. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. The letter was 2 pages written in a cramped and careful hand. "Ren," he began, "you don't have to read this. You don't have to respond. I'm not writing it because I expect anything from you. I'm writing it because your grandmother came to see me 5 years ago and sat across from me with your mother's eyes and told me that someday her granddaughters would come home and that I would have to decide what kind of man I wanted to be in whatever time I had left. She didn't ask me to testify. She didn't ask me to confess. She just told me what my silence had cost, and she told me that she forgave me, which was harder to hear than anything else she said. And then she left, and I spent the next 5 years trying to figure out what a man does with forgiveness he doesn't deserve. I think maybe he tries to do one thing right. I testified because it was the right thing, because Clara deserved it, because you and Eli deserved it. Not because I had anything to gain. I gained nothing, and I knew that going in. But Ruth spent 14 years building the case against the man who killed my wife. The least I could do was show up when it counted. I'm not asking for a relationship. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think that's something I have the right to ask for. But I want you to know that I think about you. Both of you. I think about the father I should have been. I think about the choices I made and what they cost everyone around me. Your grandmother was the strongest person I ever encountered. Your mother was the kindest. And you, Ren, you survived everything I did to your family. And you came out the other side still standing, still fighting, still taking care of your brother. That's not anything I gave you. That's entirely you. I'll serve the rest of my time. When I get out, I won't come looking for you. I promised Ruth, and keeping that promise is the one thing I can still do for her. But if someday, years from now, when the distance feels different, you want to talk, I'll be there. I'm sorry, Ren. For all of it. Raymond. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it with care and placed it in the wooden box with the carved sunflowers beside Ruth's letters and Clara's photograph and the decoded page from the journal. I closed the lid and ran my fingers over the carved petals the way I had come to do, feeling the care in each line, the patience required to make something so detailed, the hours of quiet work that produced it. I was not ready to forgive Raymond Cole. I did not know if I would ever be ready, but I did not throw the letter away. I put it with the other things that mattered in the box that held the evidence of everything our family had been and lost and found and was still in the process of becoming. That felt like something. The beginning of a door not yet opened, not yet permanently closed. The first anniversary of our arrival fell on a Thursday in March. We opened the farm stand that morning. Eli had built it over the winter from reclaimed lumber, a simple open structure at the edge of the property near the gate, with a hand-painted sign that read, Maddox Farm, in letters he had stenciled carefully over the course of 2 evenings. Underneath, in smaller letters, fresh produce, eggs, dairy. We were not prepared for how many people came. Farmers who had known Ruth and wanted to see what her grandchildren had made of the place. Townsfolk from Mill Haven who had heard the story in the way that stories travel in small communities, incomplete, embellished in some places, accurate in others, but fundamentally about something real. Marjorie Pell arrived at 9 in the morning and purchased 2 heads of lettuce and a quart of goat milk, and stood at the stand for 20 minutes talking to every person who came. As she was leaving, she turned back. Your grandmother would be proud, she said. From Marjorie, this was an extraordinary statement. I understood it as such. 3 restaurants in the county signed delivery contracts that month. The money was modest but consistent. We built the second phase of the aquaponics system using plans from Ruth's 4th journal. The vertical growing towers that she had never had the time or the physical capacity to complete. They worked exactly as she had calculated. The tilapia grew, the plants grew. The water cycled through its closed loop. In the elegant relationship Ruth had designed, each element supporting every other. Eli received his acceptance letter in March as well. Full scholarship, Montana State University's Department of Agricultural Sciences, with a specific commendation for an application project on closed-loop aquaponic systems in high-altitude climates. He would take the first year online, staying at the farm before transitioning to campus for the remaining 3 years. My 14-year-old brother, the one who had been sitting on a concrete bench behind a converted motel when I found him with electrical tape on his sneakers and walls behind his eyes, so high I thought they might never come down, was going to college. I did not make a production of it. He would not have wanted that. I just said, Ruth knew. He looked at me. She left you those journals because she knew, I said. She knew what you would do with them. He was quiet for a moment. Then he went back to checking the pH levels in the growing beds, because that was who Eli was, someone who responded to large things by attending to the next immediate necessary thing, which I had come to understand was its own form of wisdom. Cal moved into the small cabin at the back of the property in April. He said it was for the workload. We understood what it was actually for. He had been alone in his house down the road for a very long time. And alone was something he had done out of necessity for so many years that he had forgotten it was a choice rather than a condition. It was not a choice anymore. Delia came every weekend and sometimes more. She brought food, checked the animals, sat with us in the evenings when the work was done. She had her father's directness and her own particular brand of warmth, which expressed itself less in words than in the steady fact of her continued presence. Harlow County officially ruled Clara Cole's death a homicide in June. The case was formally closed with Victor Greer's conviction named as the resolution. A clerk from the county records office called to tell me, reading from a document in a neutral voice. And when she finished, I thanked her and set down the phone and sat for a moment in the quiet of the hut. Clara Cole, 1980, 2012. The county's record said homicide. What it could not record was everything else she had been. We arranged for her remains to be moved. It required paperwork and patience, and Marjorie's considerable knowledge of the county's administrative processes. But in September, Clara Cole was reinterred at the back of the Maddox Farm property in the quiet place where the cleared land met the tree line beside the woman who had spent 14 years trying to bring her killer to justice. Mother and daughter. Finally, together. We placed a second stone beside Ruth's. Clara Cole, 1980-2012. Beloved Mother. Truth found. On the evening we placed it. The sky above, the property went through every color it knew: gold first, then amber, then a deep rose that faded at the edges into the blue of approaching night. Eli and I stood in front of the two stones as the light changed around us. Biscuit lay in the grass. At our feet, old and slow, but present the way he had been present since the first afternoon we walked into the clearing and found him waiting. I had brought the last letter, the one found in Ruth's bedside drawer after she died, the one Cal had kept for 8 months, waiting for the right moment to give it to us, knowing in the way that people know things when they have lived long enough and paid enough attention that the right moment would announce itself clearly. I unfolded it. My dearest Wren and Eli, it began. I dreamed of you last night. Wren, you were laughing. Your hair was blowing in the wind, and you looked like your mother. And it made me so happy I woke up. Eli, you were running across the fields, really running the way children run when they are not running from anything but simply moving because it feels like the right use of a body and a clear day. You looked free. I don't know if you will ever read these words. I have written so many words that have not reached you, so many letters that came back with their seals unbroken. But I keep writing because love does not stop requiring expression, simply because the channels of expression have been blocked. Love finds whatever it can. It uses what it has. I have left you everything I have. This land, this system, this community that has been kinder to me than I deserved. The money I saved for years, $1 at a time, against the day you would need it. The evidence I gathered patiently and alone against the day justice would become possible. And these journals because I wanted you to understand, not just what I built, but how I thought, what I believed, what sustained me through the years when the distance felt like it might outlast me. You were never abandoned. I need you to know that before anything else, and I need you to believe it, not because I am telling you, but because the evidence is all around you if you are standing where. I hope you are standing when you read this. Every nail in that structure, every seed in those beds, every fish in those tanks, every letter in that box, everything I did with every day I was given. After the day you were taken from me, all of it was for you. I believe you found each other. I believe you found this place. I believe you are standing together somewhere on this land, and that something in you that was broken has begun to repair itself. Not because the damage was not real. It was real, and I am so sorry for every year of it. But because broken things can heal. And you are both so much stronger than the circumstances that shaped you. Find the truth. I believe you already have. Find justice. I believe it is coming. Find each other. I believe you already have, and know that wherever I am, and I am somewhere I am certain of that, whatever form it takes I am watching, I am proud, and I am loving you still. All my love, always. Grandma Ruth. I folded the letter when I finished. The sky had gone from rose to the deep blue purple of a Montana dusk. The first stars were appearing distant and clear, and impossibly numerous. Eli's hand found mine. We stood there for a while, not talking, not needing to. Two people who had been handed trash bags and told that was the sum total of what they were worth, standing on 43 acres of land that an old woman had purchased quietly and built carefully and left waiting for them, standing beside the graves of the two women who had loved them, one who had died protecting them, one who had spent 14 years building the place for them to come home to. I thought about what it would have cost Ruth to maintain that faith across a decade of unreturned letters and closed doors and the daily grind of uncertainty to keep building. Keep documenting, keep believing without any guarantee that the people she was building for would ever come. I thought about what it means to love someone across an impossible distance, to keep the evidence, to maintain the systems, to prepare for an arrival you cannot be certain will happen, but cannot bring yourself to stop believing in. After a while, I said, "Hey, Grandma. Hey, Mom." The wind moved through the grass. The pines made their quiet sound. "We did it," I said. "We found the truth. We finished your system. We made this place into something." I paused. I wish you could see it. I wish you could see Eli, how much he's grown, what he's becoming. I wish you could see Cal, how much lighter he looks now that he has somewhere to be. I stopped. Tried again. I wish you could see me. I think I'm okay. I think for the first time in a long time, I think I'm actually okay. Eli squeezed my hand. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the photograph I had been carrying every day since Ms. Harker's office. The original Ruth in the rocking chair, the sleeping baby, the tears on her cheeks. I had kept it face up since the day I first understood what it meant. I looked at it one more time in the fading light. Then I took out the new one. Delia had taken it 2 weeks ago on a bright October afternoon, Eli and me in front of the Quonset hut, arms around each other's shoulders, squinting into the sun. The farm spread out behind us in every visible shade of green. We looked like people who lived somewhere, people who belonged to something. On the back, I wrote Wren and Eli Cole. The day we finally came home. March 15th, 2026. Exactly 14 years from the date on the back of Ruth's photograph. Exactly 14 years from the last day she held me. Biscuit shifted in the grass at our feet and let out a long, slow breath. The same sound he had made the first afternoon we came, when he pressed his muzzle into my hand and something in him released. The sound of an animal that has been keeping watch for a very long time and has finally been permitted to rest. The stars were fully out now. More stars than I had ever seen anywhere, more than I had known could exist in a single sky. The kind of stars that are only visible when you are far enough from everything that was obscuring them. Inside the hut, the grow lights burned their steady blue-white glow. The fish turned their quiet circles. The plants reached upward in the way that plants reach when they have everything they need. The system that Ruth had designed and we had built, and would spend years improving clothes complete each element, sustaining every other, hummed along in the dark. I had spent my whole life believing I was one of the people the world was designed to discard. I had believed that because the evidence was abundant and the counter-evidence was invisible, hidden in pipes buried under stones, sealed in boxes carved with sunflowers returning to sender in stacks, that a dying woman kept because she could not bring herself to throw away the proof of her own love. I had been wrong about what the evidence meant. She had never stopped. And because she had never stopped, we were here, on this land, in this life, with these people and these animals and this system that grew food from water and light and the quiet chemistry of living things supporting each other. We were home, and we were never gonna leave.